Hello, I'm Janna and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. So today we're trying something new. I have been enjoying the little crossover comparison series that we've been doing. So I decided why not pull out a variety of inks to create and play with today. If you'd like to see exactly which inks we're going to be looking at, go ahead and pause here. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be exploring different inks to see what they do and how they work on a couple of different substrates. So traditionally, I have never used anything really outside of distress inks. Distress inks have always been my go-to, but I have done a little dabble with some Jane Davenport inks, who has quite the variety of inks in her collection. Most recently, though, I discovered a new company that I'm very, very curious about. They are known as Ferris Wheel Press, and they also make absolutely gorgeous inks. So I'm very curious how these work with different techniques that I'm quite familiar with from the world of distress. I want to see if other inks, like the Jane Davenport Incredibles, can play in a similar way that distress does. So we're going to be doing some swatching and some cross comparison to see what all of these different inks can do. So we're going to be pulling in some Distress Ranger watercolor cardstock. This is the cardstock that I'm most familiar with working on, and since inks are typically water activated, this seems like a good substrate to start our swatching on. So the plan is to do a swatch, a bleed test, and a little bit of blending and some stamping. Later on, we'll try some other substrates and see what other types of effects we can get with the inks. So we're going to start with distress inks. What I have today, we're going to be using picked raspberry, squeezed lemonade, twisted citron, mermaid lagoon, and wilted violet. So just off to the side, I'm going to put just a teeny tiny drop onto the media mat, and we will go from there with a little bit of swatching and a bit of blending. So for applying the inks, I decided to go with the Tim Holtz Distress Water Brush. I love the Fine Detailer one by Ranger, and this is how I'm going to be swatching all of the inks that I have today. Later on, we will get into maybe some painting and some more blending, and then I'm going to pull in these lovely brushes. These are intended like for Japanese calligraphy, so we know that they're definitely intended for use with ink. All right, let's start swatching. So first we've got our picked raspberry. Lovely as always. It's super vibrant, and it's from that very familiar Distress palette, which I know quite well. So then we'll move into a bit of squeezed lemonade. Got that. And as always, super, super vibrant. Definitely a favorite within the distress world. If I need something cheerful, squeezed lemonade is definitely my go-to ink. Then we'll pull in some twisted citron. This always reminds me of like a very spring green or something lime. So take that, put that right here. Okay. Then we've got a bit of Mermaid Lagoon. This one is so tropical. And blues are usually my go-to colors within the world of distress. So let's put that right here. For each ink family, I'm trying to go with about 5 inks of a similar color. It's not going to be quite possible across all the inks, but we're going to try. All right, and last but not least, we've got a dash of wilted violet. Okay, there is that delicious purple. Okay, so since I'm already working with that purple, we're just going to do a little bit of a gradient. So as you can see, tons and tons of color, goes on pretty much almost forever. So I've got that, and then we'll do a blend. So I've got that lovely, lovely purple, and then I want a dash of the Mermaid Lagoon. There we go. I'll just take that and blend that out. And as we know, these colors play very nicely together. So no surprises here. Just lots of gorgeous color. And these are absolutely made for stamping, because we know that these are the re-inkers for the Tim Holtz Distress ink pads. So I'm just going to brush some ink over a stamp. I have a lovely foam sponge stamp by Jane Davenport. Thought it'd be fun to use a different type of stamp just for once. And I'm just lightly brushing the ink on, and we already know that this, yes, it will stamp. Tim has also had some foamy type stamps in the line through Ideology at one point, so yes, the inks will play nicely. Okay, so I think I've got a pretty decent bit of ink. Now I'm just going to take the Distress Mister, give that a quick spritz, and stamp it down. Let's see. And there we go. Stamping beautiful as always. And if we zap this with a little bit of water, we know that we're going to get some lovely wicking. Just like that. You can already see it. Okay, so we're going to go on and start looking at some of the Ferris Press inks next. Now we're going to talk about the Ferris Press inks. So right away, the first thing that I noticed about these is the packaging. Look at this. We've got glass bottles. To me, they look very vintage inspired, but look a little bit modern because we have something like a nut on the top of here. It's a very neat cap. And the labels are, well, I'd say they're pretty vintagey, maybe even bordering on steampunk. So this ink right here, this one has some mica in it, so you have to shake it before using it. I like that added shimmer, but I'm not quite sure how well that really shows up on paper. It's a nice effect in the bottle, but whether or not it's practical when in use remains to be seen. So these inks come in 3 different packaging options. You've got the large ones. This is flat, and this contains 38 milliliters. Those come in a box that looks like this. And by the way, the art on the box is super, super cool. So this is what that would come in. It's got the name of the company, it's got the title, and then it's got some super cool art on here. The art is really neat. And I love the fact that there are cats on this. That makes me super, super happy. And then we also have the little charger sets. These come in a curated set of 3. And just like a little small sampling so that you can decide which colors you would like to get more of. So we've got those. Those come in a similar box as the 38 mil, but like in a pack of 3. Then we have these little guys. These contain 20 milliliters, and that's a pretty cool bottle. I like it. I like the roundness of it. It's different. This one again has some mica powder in it, so we're looking at a bit of shimmer, which is interesting. And those come in a more squarish box like this. Again, the artwork is phenomenal. On the box it says, "Fancy a game of croquet? Take a step into the Queen of Hearts garden where painting the roses and creative bloom by the treeful. No need to watch your head at this party. In fact, let it spin away in a flourish of shimmering whims." So this is a 20 millimeter bottle of ink. And the description of the ink here says, Ferris Wheel Press fountain pen inks are water-based, evenly toned, rich, and saturated. To experience the full magic of the fairy tale collection, pair the ink with medium to broad nibs or dip pens used for your next artistic epiphany. But I know nothing about calligraphy, so I'm thinking more along the lines of water painting with these. So, great packaging, interesting shape, and we'll now need to see how that color looks. So let's go ahead and swatch these out. So the first color that we're going to be swatching includes Malibu Blush. So let's take some of that. And, okay. I do like the color. It's neat, but it really goes down different from what I'm used to. It's like I'm used to things that are kind of more watercolor-like, but this, it's moving differently. I'm not quite sure how yet, but it definitely feels like it's moving differently. Okay, let's go on to the yellow. This is going to be Sparkling Champagne. So just open that. And I'll just dip the water brush right in there. Okay. And let's put that down. Ooh. That is a very vintage themed yellow. I like it. Very cool. All right, set that down. Next, we're going to go for a green. This lovely green is Emerald Garden. So we're going to give it a good shake because there is some mica settled at the bottom. So I'm hoping that that might actually stir up enough that we might see it on the paper, but I don't know. So let's go ahead and swatch that out. Very intense green. Nice. I don't see any sparkle as of yet, but maybe I'll notice something more when this dries. All right, so we've got the green. Now we'll be going in for some blue. So the next ink we have is the Riveting Pond. That's a really fun name. So I'm just giving that a shake because there is some mica swirling around it here, and I want to see what it might do. Okay, so we've got that. We've got our water brush. Give that a good dip, and let's see what happens. So this is interesting. It's a very pale blue. Okay. Definitely interesting. All right. So last but not least, we're going to turn to the purple of this group. And that's going to be Bayou Berry Mist. So I'll take that. Just going to dip. And, ooh, that's just like a really stormy purple. That is super, super pretty. Interesting. Okay, so that would be our swatch. Now we're going to do the gradient. We'll see how that goes. All right, so we're starting with the purple again. Let's take that, start here, and see how that goes. Ooh, that really goes and goes and goes. Huh. Not what I was expecting. That's got really good carry through. Neat. All right, now for the blend. So, got some more of that purple. There we go. And now I want to blend it out with that blue. So I'll take that. The blend is absolutely lovely. That is great. That's good news. I'm starting to feel like maybe I could watercolor with this. All right, and now the big question is, will this stamp? So we're just going to quickly clean off our stamp. And I'm going to use some of the beautiful Malibu pink and see what we get. Now, this is intended for a fountain pen, so I don't know if there's any guarantee that this is intended to stamp whatsoever. But since we're here, we might as well try. Maybe we'll get surprised. The thing is, different art supplies are intended for different uses, and not all inks are necessarily for stamping. But if we don't try, we don't know. And I am quite curious and would love to know. All right, so I've got the stamp ready. We've misted it, and now we stamp it. Okay, let's see. Ooh, Not bad. It's a little bit more runny than I expected, but it stamps. This is going to have possibilities I like. Okay, so let's clear the deck and we're going to move on to our next Inky category. This is going to be Inkcredibles by Jane Davenport. Now, when I think Jane Davenport, I think all things rainbows and rainbowitis. So, we've got a very similar color lineup to what we saw in Distress. We have got Incredible inks. We've got Watermelon, Lemon Sherbet, Limeade, Fresh Air, and Hydrangea. Really fun names. Alright, so I do know that these are water activated, and I do know that they also work really well as watercolors. I have had a chance to play around with these, so I'm pretty familiar with how they work. So that's the good news. Alright, let's go ahead and get some ink flowing. So we'll start with the watermelon. There we go. Nice and rich, smooths out beautifully. No issues with that whatsoever. Okay, now for a little bit of the lemon sherbet. Now this one is interesting. This is from some of Jane's earliest inks, and this one is actually scented. Believe it or not, it actually smells like lemons. It's surprising, but it does. There was a whole line of inks that were scented. All of the Incredibles at one point had a scent. Okay, so let's try that lemon sherbet. Super bright. Definitely reminds me of squeezed lemonade. It's definitely got squeezed lemonade type vibes. All right. Next, we got our limeade. There we go. Put that down. Again, it looks really, really similar to Twisted Citron, so I'm definitely in my happy spot with these colors. Now, just a moment to mention the packaging. These are such a unique shape. I love that. Now, also interestingly, these are the only inks that I have that do not come in a glass bottle at this moment. But I also want to draw your attention to the artwork. These little faces right here with a little drink, that is actually Jane Davenport's art. She designs all of her labels, and her art always makes her way onto her packaging, which I absolutely love. It tells you exactly what the thing is and what to expect. The next color we're going to pull in is Fresh Air. So let's go ahead, take a little of that, and we'll put that right here. Very, very vibrant. Definitely looks like blue skies to me. All right, so we've got that. Last color, we've got the Hydrangea. So this is going to be a very blue purple. All right, so we'll take that. Oh, I forgot. This is really actually blue. Be right back. I'm going to grab a second purple ink. Okay, let's go with some violet syrup. So just pick a little of that up on the brush, and there we go. Nice, lovely purple, or technically violet. You know, it's interesting. I'm seeing like similar shades to the bleed out of wilted violet, so that is kind of cool. All right, now let's go ahead and do our gradient. So this one actually fades out pretty fast. We have some decent color, and then it blends out pretty quickly. Well, let's see how the blend goes. It's gonna go good. I already know that because these inks are super friendly to work with. Okay, and we'll mix that with a little fresh air. And yes, the blend is gorgeous. There we go. Okay, now stamping. These do stamp. I have seen Jane stamp with these before, so I know that we're going to get some good results. So let's go ahead. We're just going to brush that ink on, and then we'll be able to see how that does on paper. There we go. Just adding a little bit of ink here and there. Good. Doesn't really show up. You can't see much of anything, but I do know that I've stamped with these in the past and seen demos with them being stamped. So let's go ahead, take that, stamp that down right here. And yes, stamping comes out quite nice. The color's still vibrant, we've got good clear image, and there isn't a whole lot of bleed. Though if we do a little bit of misting, the ink will start to move pretty quickly. Before we move on, I forgot. I wanted to do one more test in between. I want to see how these work with glass dip pens. Now, I know that the Ferris Wheel Press are intended to work with all sorts of different pens. The Jane Davenport ones are definitely intended to work with pens. Jane has several mermaid pens that have specialty nibs, and incidentally, this glass dip pen is also by Jane. So hers definitely, yes, will work with the dip pen. Now, the distress inks are not really intended for calligraphy or dip pens, but I would like to see how they work. So I'm going to start with the JD and we'll work our way back just to do a quick dip pen test. So just dripping a teeny bit of ink right onto the brush tip of the glass pen, and we will see how that works. I am not very good with these, but we'll give it a go. So, yep, just gonna make like a little spiral. So yes, the JDs work wonderfully with the dip pen. There we go, and that actually goes quite a bit. That's really smooth. I don't use glass pen enough. It's something I should do more of. Okay, so I'm gonna clear that off. And now I'll go for one of the Ferris Press inks. So we'll just take that, set that here, we'll dip the pen. Yep, we've definitely got ink on here. And now we'll just try the little curly cues. And yes, that works wonderfully. Like I said, the Ferris Press is advertised as a calligraphy and writing type of ink. So I'm not surprised that it plays so nicely. And just look at that. That has quite a bit. It lets me work for quite a while. Very good. All right, now on to the distress inks. Distress ink is a lot heavier, and it is a re-inker for an ink pad, so it's really not intended for this purpose. But I still want to try just to see what sort of effect it might have. So we're going to take just a little of the Mermaid Lagoon. I'm dripping that right onto the pen tip. It's moving, so that's a good sign. Let's see what it does. So again, I'm just going to do the little curly cues. Oh, that actually works. I'm really surprised. I thought the re-inker, being a re-inker, would be too thick to want to play nicely with the glass pen. So, this could be a future possibility for things. But with distress ink, because there are so many, not all of the inks have the exact same consistency. Some of them are a little more watery and some are just a hair more thick. The distress colors are really unique, and I do recall seeing like different reactions with different colors. So this may just be a case it works really well for Mermaid Lagoon, but maybe not so well for others. But what I'm seeing looks really promising. Cool. All right, so this would be our first chart done. We'll go ahead, set this aside, and we'll start on our second comparison. Now, for the remaining two inks, these are also Jane Davenport inks, but these inks are intended to do different things. The first ones that we looked at, the Inkcredibles, are water-soluble inks, and they are intended to move and to play and to act like, well, watercolors. Now, there's another type of ink that she makes, and these are called tattoo inks. And the way they are presented is pretty awesome. So I've only got 3 of them at this time, but what I do have includes Ahoy, Full Sail, and I. But look at the bottle. The bottle is so cool. It's in the shape of a skull. We've got a little pirate theme going on here. These are just too cool. And now the difference between the tattoo inks and the Inkcredible. These are supposed to be permanent. Yes, they play with water, but once they're dry, the theory is they set and can't be moved. They're supposed to be a permanent ink, hence tattoo. So let's go ahead and swatch these out and see what they look like. And these come with a little dropper in the top. So just take a little of that and put that off to the side. There we go. Now, the interesting thing about this ink, some of them are really, really opaque. So I believe that they are intended to layer over other things. And since they can't be reactivated with water once they're down, that means there's all sorts of wonderful possibilities for mixed media opportunities. Hopefully later on I'll be able to get more of this collection. I'd love to explore it. It seems to be a really fun ink. All right. So let's go ahead and swatch these three. So first we are taking the Ahoy. That's the beautiful yellow. Yeah, that goes down a lot more opaque than the others, but it is a lovely color. Then we've got the blue, which is Full Sail. And really a little bit seems to go a long way. Huh. That's a nice blue. It's definitely getting me Mermaid Lagoon vibes again. All right. And I got that mysterious purple. Ooh. Very cool. All right, so let's see how that does for a gradient. Start right here. Ooh. Not bad. It starts pretty strong and then it kind of tapers out, but I like the color a lot. All right, and let's see how the blend goes. Start here. Go for that blue. Yep, blendability is still good. Now, my big question is, how is this going to react when it's dry? Will these completely become unmovable once they're dry if I add water to them? So I've dried these off with the Ranger Heat Tool. Now I'm going to add some water to these and see what happens. Let's add some to the swatch. And that blue is, for the most part, not moving. Nope, that is staying put. So this is definitely very permanent. Once it's down, it doesn't want to get up and play anymore. It's done. There's maybe a little bleed, but not a lot. Not like the way Distress would react. It's very permanent. Well, that is quite useful. Okay. So now we'll do the dip pen test. I'm going to get a little bit of that blue and see how that goes. All right. So we're just going to take that, going to, ooh, and that works very lovely with the dip pen. No issues whatsoever. That is good. Okay, so dip pen test, yes, it works. And now for some stamping. How does it work when stamped? So we're going to take some of that lovely purple color and we'll brush that onto the stamp and then see what happens. It should work just fine. I don't anticipate anything unusual with this. This is a pretty fluid ink and I don't see why there'd be any reason that we can't stamp with it. Okay. That's good. Give that a spritz and stamp it. And yes, it stamps quite nicely. It's probably a bit more crisp than the other Jane Davenport stamp inks that we've tried, but I think that's because it's not really as water soluble as the others. It plays nicely with water, but this is kind of like more, it was like a little more dry before I stamped it, so the ink doesn't appear to want to spread as quickly as some of the others. All right, next, on to Pigments of Imagination. These are a matte ink by Jane. So, what we've got first, we've got Phoenix. Again, these are water activated and tend to act kind of like watercolors. So, take some Phoenix, spread that down. Very, very pretty. Like that a lot. These colors are very vibrant, and once they have hit the water, they like to play. Alright, there isn't really a yellow in this set, so I went with the next best thing. We have some gnome. Now, again, check out the packaging on these. They've got fun hand lettering on here, and then they've got these great squarish glass bottles. Absolutely love it. Alright, so let's take some gnome, and that's going to be our next color. It's kind of an orangey yellow, so close enough. Good. Now we'll go for some Nessie. That's a lovely green. Take some of that. Put that right here. There we go. Nice and fluid. Then we've got some puff. Oh, that's a little stiff. All right. Take that. That's going to go here. Very vibrant blue. I like that. And the last color that we're going to be using from the set is Sealy Court. So all of these have a very fairy tale type theme to them. All right, Sealy Court. Oh, this is one of my favorites. That purple is so, so good. I love it. There we go. Okay, let's see how the blend does. I'm going to do the gradient. Start right here. Ooh, that has got a really nice gradient to it. That goes. All right, now the blend. Starting with that lovely blue puff and then mingling in some Sealy Court. And yes, the blend is fantastic. No issues with that at all. Love it. All right, now let's go for the dip pen. These shouldn't have any issue whatsoever with dip pens. They should play quite nicely. And yes, they do. Very easy to maneuver with. All right, so that takes care of that. Now let's move on and see about a little bit of stamping. We're going to be stamping with some Phoenix. Okay, just put the lids back on these, and we'll take some Phoenix. So again, there shouldn't be any issue with stamping with these. These are a lovely ink, and they are intended to work with all sorts of mediums. All right, so just brush that on here. Very good. A little bit more ink. Okay, good. So now we'll just give this a spritz and stamp. There we go. Lovely stamping. So this has been a quick comparison between different varieties of ink. We've got our classic Distress Ranger ink, which I absolutely love. And then we have a newcomer. We've got Ferris Wheel Press. I am loving their color palette. It's very vintagey and it works pretty nicely. I can't wait to do more experimenting with this. Then we've got the classic JD Inkcredible inks. Vibrant, very blendable, very friendly. We've got the Jane Davenport Permanent Inks Tattoo Ink. So that's kind of a different creature unto itself. But again, it does all the things, so always happy to use these. Then we have the matte pigments, which are the pigments of imagination. Again, they do all the things, and they react a little bit differently. They've got a different kind of texture to them. So it's really fun having all sorts of different inks to play with. Now, we're going to be heading into doing a little bit of art with these. We've done the swatches, we've done the comparison. Now it's time for the play. What we're going to do first is have a ink splatter play. This is my favorite Tim Holtz Distress ink technique. It's where we take our ink. So usually I'd be doing this with ink pads or sprays, but it can be definitely done with reinkers. Just, you have to go really light. You put down the small drizzle of the ink, just like this, and we're going to be doing a little dip and dry. So I'm using Squeezed Lemonade, Mermaid Lagoon, and Picked Raspberry. Okay. So we've got our ink here. I need just a little bit more of that. There we go. Now I'm going to spritz. Got the sprayer right here because we want to get the ink moving. And then we just start dipping our watercolor paper. So I'm going to go ahead and put this part in fast forward, and we're going to be doing this for all of the different inks. Here is our Distress ink background. As you can see, water reactive, plays beautifully together, and it wicks. That is why I absolutely love Distress ink, besides the amazing color palette. So this is the technique. Now let's see what the other inks do. I have no expectation that they're going to behave in the same way, but I'm very, very curious about how they will behave. So only one way to find out. We're going to jump in and see what happens. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take some of the yellow. We've got this yellow from the Ferris Press. And we'll need some of the blue. Let's see. Try to dab that on here. Not quite sure how this is going to react. The colors are very, very different, but I am curious all the same. And now I want just a little bit of the pink. Now, where'd the pink go? All right. So we'll just take a little bit of that and see what we can do. Okay. I think that'll be good. All right. So again, I'm going to spritz this with water, and then we'll put things on fast forward as we build our background. Now, this is interesting. These inks went muddy very quickly. We ended up with some very interesting browns over here and something that looks like it's bled into black. Not what I was expecting. It definitely is water activated. We can definitely see a lot of the original color in here. It reacts very well to the speckling technique, but just the way the colors interact with each other, that is interesting because, like, as you see here, we have no muddiness whatsoever. But we've got all sorts of depth and layers. Now, this is interesting too, and it's like, I feel like the inks can do the same job. It's just, it's going to be a question of finding out which color combinations are going to play the nicest together, because we're working with a completely different variety of inks that I'm just not as familiar with. But so far, I am intrigued. Okay, moving on to our next set, we're going to be pulling in the Incredibles. Now, these are in dropper bottles, so maybe half the problem I was having earlier was that I didn't use a dropper. So, let's see if that makes a difference. Oh, I forgot, these are thicker in some ways. Or more fluid, I'm not sure which, but I forgot, these don't dispense the same way as the Distress inks do. Okay. Ooh. Ooh, that's a bit more than I wanted, but let's see what we can do. Okay, so we've got our ink. Now we spritz, and then we play. All right, so the inks are already starting to travel on me, so that's a good thing. Let's get our first pull and put this on fast forward. Okay, this is really interesting. I should have stopped after one swipe because the second I did a second swipe, it didn't layer at all. It went muddy. So right there, that's a very, very big difference between what I see with Distress ink and what I'm starting to see with other inks. So if I just do a single swipe with the JDs, then I get some beautiful ink flow, and I can definitely do the speckling technique, which is great. But if I try to layer, then I end up getting mud. There must be something in the formulation that does not allow the Distress ink to go into mud. I know it's possible to get mud, but I feel like you have to kind of work at it. These went to mud almost the second I started trying to do dips. So, very, very interesting. But now I can write myself a little note on the back. No layering, one dip only. So now I know. And same with the Ferris Press. All right. So next, let's take a look and see what the tattoo inks are going to do. So again, we'll just spread these out and see what happens. Given that these become waterproof once they dry, I am wondering how the layering is going to work, or if it's going to work, or if it's going to work better than the water reactive ones. I am really not sure in this case. Be very curious to find out what's going to happen. Because again, we're dealing with a more opaque ink. The others were very translucent. So this is going to be pretty different. All right, got our ink. Got our water. Well, let's see what happens. Now this is really interesting. This layered really well. I had my suspicions that once the first layer dried, I'd be able to layer over the top because of the permanency of what's going on here. But I was worried that any water splotches would have to be done in between stages of drying. But the water droplet technique worked well too. It's not as prominent as the Distress, which is very splotchy, but this is cool. It looks more aged with the type of water spotting that I got in here. So that is neat. Absolutely love that. Okay, now on to our last variety of ink. We're going to be using the Pigments of Imagination. So we're going to go ahead and take a bit of that and put it right onto the paper. So, oh, that's right. I don't have the same color scheme. So we're going to end up going with purple, blue, and green this time, just to have some cohesive colors to play with. All right. Got a bit of that. So first color I put down was Nessie. Now I'm going to go for some Sealy Court. There we go. And now I want a dash of Poof. So not sure how this one's going to work. I suspect it's going to be like the Pigments of Imagination, and we're going to be best off with one scoop and then doing our droplets. So I think I'm going to approach it that way because I'm guessing it's going to act pretty much in the same way. So again, spritz and dip. So here is the final dip and drip technique. This one didn't do nearly as much with the drips, but the blending and the layering was great. And the colors, they're not nearly as intense. They're definitely a bit softer and more pastel, but I'm loving the way the colors were able to play with each other. So let's just take a quick recap and look at all of the different inks that we used. So distressing. This was the classic technique that I based the other swatches on. So first we have the Ferris Press. As we can tell, it works beautifully. It's very water reactive, but we do get some muddiness because the inks don't necessarily want to play nice with each other, which is very interesting, but I'm loving the effect that we got. Then we had the Jane Davenport Inkcredibles. So this is a dip it once, then splatter it, and then leave it because it will get muddy. Then we had the tattoo ink. Layering worked surprisingly well, and we got great effects. Not nearly as pronounced with the drip drops, but it is still a really neat effect. And then the last one that we did was with the Pigments of Imagination. We ended up with a beautiful blend, less prominent on the drips, but we got some great layering. So the technique with the dip and dry can work across brands. Just don't expect to get the exact same results that you would get with distressing, because distress is distress, and all of the other inks have their own unique properties which make them amazing to play with. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit of watercoloring. So we're going to go ahead and clear this, and I'm going to be bringing in the Jane Davenport watercolor journal. So my initial plan is to use all of the JD inks to create something on this page. Then we'll use the Tim Holtz inks and the Ferris Press inks over here. All right, we're going to put this on fast forward as we make some art. Here is our finished art with the Jane Davenport inks. For this mermaid scene, we used a combination of Pigments of Imagination, Inkcredible inks, and tattoo ink. So I'm just going to go through and point out a few sections where we used different inks. For the line work, using a glass dip pen, we used tattoo ink to add in some interesting highlights here. And I also did some of the line work with the tattoo ink as well. The beautiful goldenish color is also tattoo ink. So moving on to the next type, we used a combination of Inkcredible inks. I used the Fresh Air and violet syrup. So we use some violet syrup to add highlights into the mermaid's hair, and I also use the fresh air to add some blue to the oceany background. For the other colors, we used Nessie. This was for the seaweed, and this is Inkcredible inks. We use Sealy Court for her hair. We used some poof for the background. We also used a dash of Gnome to add some highlights on her swim top, and then a teeny dash of Phoenix for her red lips. So this would be just a brief overview of how I would use the Jane Davenport inks when creating some art. As you can see, they're very water friendly, they love to activate, they blend beautifully, and all of them play very well together. So definitely a medium that I greatly enjoy using. Now we're going to have a good play with the Tim Holtz Ranger Distress ink. Now for those, I am pulling in my entire Distress ink palette. So on here, I have got 27 different inks to play with, and this is my favorite way to dispense these inks. So we're going to turn things over to a new page, and we're going to do another spread. So let's go ahead and stick this on fast forward and have some creative fun. Here is our finished creative play with the Tim Holtz Ranger Distress inks. I am really enjoying this. This is so moody, and it's got really interesting bleeds going on. It's absolutely intriguing. Now, this isn't the typical way that I would use distress inks. Normally I use distress inks in a very technique-based manner with other things like stencils, resist, or stamps. So I really enjoyed taking this in a slightly different direction. We have got some wonderful blends going on, and we also got some of the wonderful distressed speckliness that you'd expect to see when using these in a technique-based way. Now, the interesting thing is how these layer up. When they layer, the inks kind of push each other around. Sometimes they blend, and sometimes they overpower each other, but we've got this really neat shadow thing going on, which I'm absolutely loving. The blendability and the water activation of these gives them a completely unique look all around, and that's why it's always going to be my go-to ink for the majority of card making projects. Okay, now let's take a look at the colors that we used. We have some picked raspberry, wilted violet, rustic wilderness, walnut stain, prize ribbon, mermaid lagoon, and chipped sapphire. Again, I just love the way the inks interacted together, and we were able to create something a bit more brooding, not quite as cheerful, but I feel that this has quite a bit of depth. All right, so we're going to be clearing the table and moving to our last ink category, the Ferris Wheel Press inks. I can't wait to see how these react on watercolor paper. They've got such great colors and fluidity to them. If the swatching that we did earlier is any indication of how these are going to react, I can't wait to get into the inky depths to see what we can achieve. All right, so we're going to go ahead, turn the page, and get started on the third art. Here are the finished results with the Ferris Wheel Press inks. I love the vibrancy on these, and since I'm just getting used to the inks, it takes a little bit more play in order to really understand what an ink does. So I ended up doing two different pictures. We have our very vibrant koi fish. Here I was trying to experiment with how the inks wick and layer. That was very enjoyable, and I was liking how we can do a bit of layering just with water. I thought that was pretty interesting. Then over here, I tried to go for more of a smooth, flowing type of look, and I was really happy that the yellow can actually kind of go over the top of darker colors. So this was really a good play and just getting a feel for the inks. I love the colors, I love the way they move, and I think these will be absolutely fantastic to explore in the future. Now we're going to put everything together that we have been looking at so far. We are going to be creating a whole spread using distress inks, the Ferris Wheel Press, and of course some Jane Davenport. So let's put them all together for a mixed media art and see where this takes us. All right, let's go ahead and put this part on fast forward. Here are the finished results using all three inks. So each of these inks has their own individual strengths and unique properties, and I think that I was able to capture the essence of all three varieties. So over here for the cave, we used distress ink because I wanted to get something that had lots of texture on it, and I wanted to go for that grungy kind of earthy type of feel. So in here we've got some black soot, we have some pumice stone, hickory smoke, and a dash of vintage photo down here in the sand. As always, the distress inks perform exactly as I'd expect them to. So I did this section first because if we isolated that, then I could do the little drip drop technique in order to get that wonderful texture going. After we put in the distress inks, then we moved on to the Jane Davenports because I know those are going to flow and they always give me a great fluid look when I'm trying to get water. So over here we used a combination of puff and Sealy Court, and this was from Pigments of Imagination, and that gave us the lovely watery background. And then down here I also added a layer of lemon sherbet for our sandy seabed, which was then layered over the top with some of the vintage photo ink. After, I didn't want to take any chances with the Ferris Wheel Press potentially leaking or spilling onto the other inks, so I went in with a Jane Davenport Masquerade marker, and I was able to mask off some of the areas so that I wouldn't get any ink bleed. It worked perfectly and kept the Ferris Wheel Press inks exactly where I wanted them to be. So we used a whole variety of inks. We have some of the Bayouberry Mist, that's here on the sea dragon's body, and then we got to incorporate some of the Ribbiting Pond, that gorgeous green, and just we got a chance to play. As you can see, there is some shimmer in here. I love the shimmer. So In conclusion, Ferris Wheel Ink Press inks are magical. They play great with other inks, and the palette fits right in line with Distress, which makes me very, very happy. So I feel that we were able to come up with a very cohesive picture using all three brands. And we ended with just a little bit of Nessie for some greenery in here, and that helped pull everything together. And as you can see, we can layer and play. Oh, we also had some of the tattoo inks that I did a little bit of line work on our Sea Dragon. So just to recap, we have been looking at a whole variety of inks today. We have played with Distress, we've explored the Ferris Wheel Press inks, and we played with a whole bunch of Jane Davenport inks, from permanent to water activated, all in gorgeous colors. So today was all about inks, and we even had a chance to swatch these out and take a look at some of the different color palettes that are available to us. Thank you so much for joining me here today at the Crafty Corner for some inky exploration and play. I hope that you've enjoyed today's crisscross comparison and creative play. Until next time, happy crafting!